Well, here we are, gang. I'm starting to put the thing back together, and I've already hit the first snag right off the bat. So my pickup's going to fit just fine, but the new ring that I got with it that I was hoping to use, because it's in better shape than the ring that I have, isn't going to fit. You can see it's too short top to bottom to cover the holes, and obviously we're not going to put new holes in the guitar. So with the rest of the hardware that the pickup came with, that'll get kept for another time. So I'm going to have to go back to the original ring, which will be okay. It's not going to be a problem, but this ring is broken. See, I got a crack there. So my solution to that problem, to make it a little bit more stable so it's going to last for a while, because I got a feeling trying to find this ring is going to be harder than trying to find that pickup. So what I'm going to do is I've got some JB Weld. This is like the sets in 6 minute stuff, cures in, I don't know, 4 hours totally. So I am going to repair this pickup ring on the inside here. I'm going to put a little in between, squeeze it together, and put a pretty good sized blob in there. And right before it sets, what I'm intending to do is make sure that it's got a flat spot on top here. I'm going to leave a blob with a flat spot, obviously be below the edge. And that way, when I reuse the ring, the spring will have a flat surface to crank down against. So even though they may not be the same spring tension on both sides, it won't cause the pickup to be countered or canted one direction or the other on the side where I'm going to do the repair. And then just to try to cover up that mess, I'm going to use a little bit of Rust-Oleum made for plastic black flat paint, and I'll just squirt a little on there. So I'm going to let that set up all the way, drill a hole through it, just big enough for the screw, paint it, put it back together, and I think it'll be way stronger than it was when it was brand new. And then I can move on to the next step. Went ahead and got my pickup wires routed through. That was no problem. Got a ground wire routed through. Gonna have to solder that on there. And I'm gonna put this new Switchcraft jack that I got pre-wired from Emerson. They wire these up really nice too, and the wire they use is like kind of like a cloth cable coated. So it's great. So my little trick, because I tried to feed the wires through there individually to get them in there, wouldn't really work. So I just took a zip tie and stuck it in through the cavity, and now makes it super easy to pull the input jack. It's called an input jack. Question for you: is that not output? That's an output jack. Why every place you go buy one of these, everywhere on the internet, this is referred to as an input jack? I'm not quite sure, because in my brain it is outputting the signal from the guitar, not inputting it. But I'm not a guy who studied electronics, so I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. This is going to be super easy to wire up with this Liberator from Seymour Duncan. So in essence, all these wires here will not be used at all, because they are for a second neck pickup. So those will get clipped off and tied off. The two green wires and the two silver wires also get clipped off and soldered together. Since I don't have a tone knob, the two red wires also get clipped off and soldered together. The black wire that comes out of it runs into the input for the guitar back here, and I'll show you the schematic of all this. So what's going to happen is I'm trying to give you a view of it. The white, red, green, and silver wires coming out of the pickup go into these bays that correspond to color: black, white, red. There's a little tiny screw. It comes with its own little screwdriver, and you just tighten it down. You basically are clamping it in there. And then on the other side, for this particular wiring schematic situation, the black wire is going to go, that is the pickup input. So that would be pot number 1 if you were using a regular potentiometer. The second one is the output. And then these two over here are both ground, and I'm going to take one goes to the trim arm claw. The other one is from the input jack. And basically all I have to do to put my Tessie switch, kill switch in the loop is just put one end of it in with this input and the other end on a ground, and it's hooked up too. So the only soldering I have to do on this whole deal is solder this ground wire on here and solder a few wires together and tape them off, and done. So we'll see how that works out. And for a guy like me, I can solder. It's not a big deal, but why solder if you don't have to? I'm not planning on ever taking this thing out of here as long as it works. So I'm going to use it, and we'll see how it works out. So next step, I'm going to lay all this out, get it all wired before I put anything in, and I think that'll be the easiest way to do it. First thing I got to do is make sure the switch is going to fit in the hole the Tessie switch that I've got. So that's next up. I'm going to get that in there, get all the wires laid out, get this soldered on, and then we'll hook everything up and see what we got from there. So I've kind of encountered another small issue, and of course these are to be expected. This is the Tessie switch IDO, I'm not sure how he pronounces it. This is the smallest one that he makes. Actually, he makes a micro, but this one I believe is a 10 millimeter diameter. So that's why I went with that. Plus it was black, it's small, low profile, and it'll fill that tone knob hole that I had originally with the EMG installed. And this guitar, when it was new in 1988, did not have a tone knob. It was a volume only knob control. So you know, in that vein, I'm trying to get back to as close as I can to that. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to enlarge that hole ever so slightly. And to do that, I have this great tool. It's a reamer, and it's very sharp. I used to build radio control helicopters, and this thing is a great tool comes in handy for modeling. So what I'll do is I'll tape off the area around this so I don't chip anything. I'm probably going to come in from the bottom and just slowly work my way up until I get barely the tip of that switch will start to fit through there, or I'll find something else that's 10 millimeter. And then I'll know, you know, exactly how much further I have to go, because I don't want to put it any bigger hole than I have to. I wish the hole wasn't there to begin with. So give that a shot next and try not to screw the finish up while I'm doing it. So next up on the to-do list is prepping this Seymour Duncan Liberator 500K volume pot to get it ready to install on the guitar. Now, and as I showed you earlier on the schematics, some of these wires are just cut off and soldered together, and some are not used at all. So these three wires here, the red, the white, and the black on the right hand side of the potentiometer are not used at all in this particular wiring scenario. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those off, and then I'm just going to save those wires. I might use those another time. And then I'm just going to put a little cap. These don't have to be soldered together. They're not going to be used. And put this little shrink wrap cap on here just to cover the tips of the wires up. And then I'm going to hit that with a heat gun. takes care of that. So go ahead and do the rest of these. These all get cut off and soldered together. These two get cut off and soldered together. And then basically it's prepped and ready to go in because all the other wiring comes from the pickups or the input jack. Well, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty now, gang. All that's left to do is tin this ground wire up, get it soldered to the claw for the trim arm, and then I can go ahead and get my volume pot put in and get everything wired up, get the cover back on, and then probably the hardest part out of the whole thing is going to be getting the Floyd Rose reinstalled, and I'm going to put new strings on. I'm going to drop down to 9s. I like 9s. That may be a little light, but we're going to give them a try, so that may require some intonation. But got my soldering iron heated up here, so let's go ahead and knock out the last little bit of this soldering and be done with it. Alright, there's that tinned up, and I'll not bore you with all the details. I'm going to go ahead and get it soldered to the claw. There's already a big blob of solder on here. I don't know if it's going to stick all that well. I took a Dremel tool and tried to grind off some of the old. I don't have a solder sucker. That appears to be permanently attached, and all it has to do is ground, and that's not going to move. As you see what I used to help prop that up, so hopefully that'll do the trick. Now, all I got to do is get these wires stripped. These are ready to go. Drop my volume pot in here. It's going to fit just like so. No problem. I got tons of room to work, and we're ready to go, so it's on to that. So now I just got to strip these wires down. Get some even bare tips. My wire strippers here are really old and have seen better days. Trying to get this outer layer off without cutting into the wires. It's not working out too good. Not really making much headway. I'm going to go to plan B. Don't try this at home, kids. I'm pretty sure that's not the proper way to do that. Whatever you got to do, right? Okay, got that off. Now we got this insulation wire in here we don't need. Or not wire, but insulation inside the wire. Alright, that should be enough to do the trick. So gang, I'm starting to go ahead and wire up the Liberator 500K volume pot. It is a little bit fiddly. I already got the black wire in there. So basically what you're dealing with is these are the pickup wires, right? And they go into each one of these little ports. I've already got the first one in, and once you get the wire in there, and what I did is I just put a little bit of a tie wrap around these other ones just to kind of hold them out of my way, which the main problem is I'm old and blind, so I had to go get my bifocals. So then once you get the wire in there, you just begin tightening that screw down. I want to make sure it's as far in there as I can get it. I did go ahead and tin these wires. I just felt like, why not? I don't want to have to take it back apart, and it was easy enough. There was no reason not to do it. And I know you can't see anything because my hand's in the way. But what I'm doing here is I've got that wire in there, and I'm screwing that little tiny screw down, and now that wire's clamped in there too. So 2 down, 3 to go, and then all I've got left to do is my ground wires and my inputs, and they go all on the back side here in these 3 leftover gates, and they have their own screws. So rather than bore you watching me try to fiddle around with these little screws, we'll just fast forward through that. Completely wired up, ready to go. Now all I got to do is mount this in the hole, stuff all these wires in, get my back plate back on, and then it's move on to getting the Floyd rose back in this bad boy. We're closing in on it.